And in this very exciting segment, we are talking about another development or several developments which are also quite revolutionary. Again, we have to go into history just a little bit, and I'm just gonna tell you that when the Soviet Union was falling apart, which you know the dates, that's late 80s or mid 80s to late 80s, and then completely fell apart in the 90s. At that point, Russia, the Soviet Union at the time, and then Russia withdrew from everywhere. Russia had influence in many countries, including in many countries in Africa and of the Middle East, and Russia withdrew from everywhere. Its influence actually became almost nil in practically all the countries. Well, of course, Russia had to deal with a lot of internal problems, work out the karma, which Russia did very successfully, guys, extremely successfully. It's probably the lowest karma of any country on the planet, or definitely one of the very, very lowest. It's practically negligible. Remember, I calibrated it. It's at 7. It's nothing, guys. It's nothing. You know, just to compare it to the US karma is like 50 right now. Karma of Ukraine is like around 63, 65 at this point. It could be even higher. If you take Afghanistan, that's going to be like in the 80s. Well, 7. That's like enlightenment, karma of the enlightenment, actually. And so now Russia is restoring influence everywhere. Russia feels that it's necessary, but at this point Russia is acting very, very carefully and does not rush into anything, does not give away resources, does not give away the farm like the Soviet Union did. I will tell you about how Soviet Union bled itself, literally gave away everything, the last of what it had, shared resources with all the poor countries of the world and most republics that leached off of it, actually. And Russians lived worse than they should have and could have, you know, on the level that we were working, and our education and what we were producing, we were not making enough money because all the resources went away. So now Russia is not doing such things anymore. They said, no, this is not going to happen anymore. But Russia has to return. Superpower has to be present in the strategic points of the planet. And so very carefully, they calculate everything a million times over, and then they decide where they're going to go, where they're going to build bases. And in this segment, I'm going to tell you about some very interesting developments. And we are talking about the Baltic and the Ust-Luga port. Then we talk about Suez Canal and Russia's return to Africa and the Sudan and Syria bases. Okay, so this has to do with the global shipping revolution. So as I said previously, remember that Russia unfortunately invested huge billions, in fact, into building ports in the republics of the Baltics, like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, which became now enemies of Russia. And they benefit from those ports, and Russia sent all the goods that went into the Baltics through those ports. Other ports, another major port, of course, is Odessa, which is in the Black Sea, and that's currently Ukraine. So, of course, all those ports are going to cede now. That includes Odessa, because Russia is not sending goods to Odessa anymore. Russia now on the Black Sea uses Novorossiysk. That's on the Russian side. That's the port that has been built up. On the Baltic, Russia really built up the St. Petersburg and Kronstadt. That's another port. But that was never enough. You know, St. Petersburg and Kronstadt, they are overused or built to capacity, and Russia is sending very minimal goods through the Baltics anymore, and they're taking away more and more business from the Baltics ports, and rightly so, because of their horrendous Russophobia. So at this point, at some point, Putin and his people decided that, wait a minute, we need more ports. And they began building very quietly again the Ust-Luga port. It's pronounced, while in English there is no such soft sign as we have in Russian that indicates the softness of the consonant. We spell it as Ust, UST, Luga, Luga port, but it's pronounced as Ust-Luga port, very soft, Ust. T is very soft. It's t. It's very particular to Russia kind of sound. So Ust-Luga port is on the Baltic Sea, not too far from St. Petersburg. This port will become one of the logistically most advanced and largest ports in the world. It will service the Silk Roads from China and eventually from India as well. And all the goods that go from Russia or through Russia will be going through Ust-Luga port, as well as St. Petersburg, of course, or Black Sea, that's Novorossiysk, but Baltics is becoming very, very important, Baltic ports. Russia may also build more ports. There are actually more ports being built on the White Sea, which is the Arctic, but we will touch upon the Arctic in the next episode. So Ust-Luga port, now that Russia is pulling back all the resources and keeping everything in house, why feed others if you can actually create huge benefits and profit for yourself by building your own port? Of course, the investment is huge, and the port is already fully functional, but it is not a fully built port yet. Next to the port, there is infrastructure. There is a city that is growing like a mushroom there. And there are refineries, there are factories, and plants that are being built. There's a lot that goes together with this Ust-Luga port. It's going to be one of the hugest conglomerates in the world to rival Rotterdam, Singapore ports, the largest ports on the planet, and it might even surpass them eventually, because remember, this is Silk Roads converging there from China, eventually from India and Iran, right, plus Russia itself, and goods will be flowing all over the world. So very exciting development. Again, you can see some of that on the map. There is more that will go through this Ust-Luga port, and that is part of the Arctic transformation. That will be the next segment. What happens with the Arctic is that there will be so much delivered, more goods delivered. I will explain to you how, through the Arctic. Also, there is a virtual road that is being built, or digital road you could call it, to wrap up the entire Eurasia, and that also has to do with the Ust-Luga port. So Ust-Luga port becomes this knot of various communications and transportation means and segments for entire Eurasia. That's how important this Ust-Luga port is. And the name, what is it? There is another port, as I said, built in the White Sea. And there will be more things happening, but Ust-Luga becomes that knot where everything converges. It's like the Suez Canal sort of thing. You cannot go anywhere unless you go through Ust-Luga port, basically. There's no canal there. I'm just saying it is more or less that same role, that you simply cannot avoid it. You have to deal with it if you want to go here, or deliver goods there, and this way and that way. Okay. Even products from Belarus are now being rerouted to Ust-Luga and to St. Petersburg, because Lithuania was so mean to Belarus. They actually did business with Lithuania, and Russians for years have been telling Belarusians to use their ports instead of Lithuanian, and Lukashenko was always playing this, like trying to sit on two chairs, like playing two ways. It's like, oh, no, we are good for now, maybe a little bit, maybe later, we'll discuss it in a year, maybe in two, maybe in three. And now that Lithuanians played such hardball against him and almost unseated him as president with the help of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, that president wannabe, now Lukashenko is taking away business from them gradually and transitioning it to Russia. And I believe he already took away most of the business from Lithuanian ports at this point. Well, that's what happens when you do these kinds of things at, some puppeteer from another country wants you to do this, and you just bury your own economy this way. So Baltic countries have lost billions upon billions from losing the trade with Russia and Belarus, especially with Russia, of course. Belarus is relatively small, although they export and import a lot, and they don't have access to seas themselves. So they, in fact, they do a lot of business still. What the Baltics want to get compensated by the US and EU for being the biggest Russophobes on the planet, together with Poland. But EU doesn't want to do that so much anymore. And the US will be in dire straits soon enough, and also will not be able to compensate them for that so much. So they really bet on the wrong horse here. Okay, so because we're talking about the global shipping revolution, as I said, this is Eurasian shipping revolution, Ust-Luga port, and then Arctic transformation will be right next to it. But it's global shipping revolution, and so we also have Suez Canal and Russia's return to Africa. Okay, how does that work? So as I said, Suez Canal is such a bloodline, such an important vessel that nobody can avoid it. You know, everybody prefers to go through Suez Canal, or you have to add tons to your trip if you go around Africa. But Suez is really running out of capacity. They will enlarge it. Yes, they will do that. And they already enlarged it, as a matter of fact, several years ago. But it did not bring more trade, because it actually also is very expensive. Not everybody can pay that. So to compensate for the expensiveness, because fees were raised dramatically, to compensate for this expensive passage, now ships are being overloaded. Remember that ship that got stuck in Suez Canal several months ago? I wrote about it on Patreon. So what happened there was that it was so overloaded that it was immovable. It just got stuck across because of some wind, and the more containers you pile up on top, then the more wind can shift you, because you literally have that mountain of containers on top of the ship, right? And the crew was very small and under-trained, apparently, and because of all this, what happened was they could not move the ship, but then they managed to like dig under it and move it somehow, or with some kind of levers they managed to unload. They didn't have to unload the containers because they were actually afraid they would have to start unloading the containers, which would lengthen the time. So Suez Canal, now more and more people are questioning, what is this? Is there any alternative? And except for going around Africa, the Cape Town and the tip of Africa, where South Africa is, there was until recently not much of a choice. But now, as I said, with all those Silk Roads, railroads, general roads that are being built through Russia, and various ports and the various connections that are being built through Russia, this is total revolution. In addition to that, Russians are building the Arctic route, and this grand Arctic route will be yet another piece in the puzzle that will alleviate Suez Canal. And so, but Suez Canal will continue being very important. Trade grows. Trade actually grows in the world. Some people said that, oh, no, it's all much more expensive. Yes, oil, the means of transportation, labor, everything is more expensive. But nevertheless, more people in countries that were previously poor live better and better, and they want better and better standard of living, and they buy more. China provides a ton of what they buy. India in the future potentially could also provide quite a bit. And actually a lot, not just China, a lot of the manufacturing, whether it's 3D or 4D, like digital manufacturing, is in Asia. And because of that, Suez will continue being extremely important, because Suez is really by sea currently is the most important road. And so because of that, Russia has returned to Africa. And again, if you look at the map, you will see how that works. So Russia is building a base in Sudan. Sudan is where you control the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. That's part of the Red Sea and Suez Canal passage. This is so Russia used to have quite a few international or foreign military bases, but USSR withdrew from all of them. Currently, Russia has, believe it or not, only 5, maybe up to 7 bases. 3 of them in Syria, by the way, and or is it 2 or 3 in Syria? I'm sorry, don't hold me to that, but at least 2 in Syria, and 2 or 3 in the nearest abroad, like in ex-republic. It's like about 3, okay? So you get like 5 bases altogether. Russians have been trying to convince Lukashenko to build a base in Belarus, but he has been refusing all this time. So Russians don't even have a permanent base in Belarus. So very few bases, like 5 or 6 at most. Now, a Sudan base becomes a really big breakthrough because, as I said, it basically controls Red Sea and Suez Canal. So Russians are building those bases very, very frugally, very meticulously, choosing like the most strategic points possible that you absolutely have to have the base there. So Sudan base becomes a really great point where all kinds of trade could come from Africa, go to that base, because the port is being built right there. There is a port, but port is being basically expanded, and so both military ships, it's a small base for military ships, but the port eventually will be large, and a lot of natural resources from different countries in Africa where Russia might have all kinds of agreements with governments eventually. That's the idea, to build all this in advance, and then you have you form agreements, you go into different countries, because a lot of countries in Africa want to see Russia there. So right now, Russia is present in big part in Central African Republic, where there is basically a humanitarian mission to bring peace to that country. But because it is Central African Republic, potentially that centrally located republic could become the balancer of Africa. Okay, so that would be very interesting to observe if Russian presence transforms it into the balancer of Africa, because it's in the center. Anything in the middle has a great potential to become a balancer. Like in Europe, it could be Austria. Look at the map; it is in the middle of Europe, or middle of Europe that is outside of Russia. Okay, all right, so that's that. But Sudan, it becomes very important, a very difficult country, very turbulent country, but with Russian presence, and they really love to have Russian presence there, because Russian presence is very stabilizing, it's very calming to all kinds of factions. Nobody like Russians can do this, like stabilize and calm down different factions and have them working together. So that is the Sudan thing. And Syria bases, of course, control Mediterranean. It's Eastern Mediterranean, but it is a very convenient passage. Also, exit out of Suez there, close to Turkey, right there. So Syria also controls, Syrian bases will also control parts of the Middle East, keep Turkey in check, and in part that's also control of the South Stream from Syria, very close to all that, to all kinds of countries there, all kinds of situations that could be managed from Syrian bases. Actually, very cool location, I have to say. So between Sudan, Syria, and Central African Republic, Russia is returning to Africa and to the Middle East. Very cool stuff. And that's actually all for this segment. And we will be proceeding to the Arctic segment, also super interesting. See you in a bit.